Hi everyone, Mark Lyman with HomeFixated.com. I am excited to talk with you today about the Festool Carvex. This is the PS420. The site, despite its appearances here, this is the corded or one of the corded models. The cord goes into this locking pivoting device here, which is really cool because it can kind of keep the cord out of your way during certain cuts. And this tool, I'm going to cover both the tool itself as well as this optional accessory pack that you can get from Festool. Both the tool itself and the accessory pack come, of course, in a Festool systainer, so everything's nice and orderly the way Festool and the way we like it here at Home Fixated. Let's talk about some of the features. First off, this tool has a strobe light. It's not for taking to the nightclub. This is basically a system to make the blade look stationary while you're cutting. Sounds like a little bit of voodoo, and it sort of is. These lights basically synchronize with the blade action so that you can look down and actually see the teeth of the blade exactly where they're going to be contacting your workpiece. It's a really cool feature. With that said, some folks are going to get annoyed by it. Some people are not going to want it during certain types of cuts. And Festool has made it optional. You can actually pull the two power buttons forward for 10 seconds. The tool beeps. Then this becomes the selector for either strobe, continuous LED on or off, and then you kind of lock that setting into place with the button on the right. So it's cool that they did give you the option to disable that, but it's a really, really neat feature, great for precision work. Another feature that's a standout on this is the pendulum cutting action. This little lever here, which goes from 0 to 3, adjusts how much or whether or not the blade is pushed forward on the upstroke or the cut stroke. Now, the time that you're going to want this set on 0 is typically if you're cutting ceramic or tile with an abrasive blade. You want it set to 0, and that blade's going to go straight up and down and cut equally on both the up and down stroke. For most of the cutting that I did, I like setting 1 or 2. Still produced a very, very clean, smooth cut. But the more aggressive you get with that pendulum action, the faster and more efficient the cut is going to be. You get a little bit of benefit of clearing out some of the debris while you're cutting with the pendulum action in effect. And the other potential benefit you get is because it's basically backing off on the downstroke, you're potentially adding a little bit of longevity to your blades because you're not raking them across the workpiece as much as you would if it was just going straight up and down and you're bearing down on the tool. So really neat feature and very adjustable and handy for all types of cuts. Another thing to be aware of is that this tool is variable speed. It's variable speed via this dial here. Normally Festool goes from 1 to 6. This one goes from 1 to 5 and then A. And the A is an automatic setting that you can use. It basically starts off the tool very slow so you can get your cut lined up. And then as you engage with the workpiece, the tool automatically brings it up to speed and increases the strokes per minute. So, you know, on some cuts in metal, for example, you're probably going to want it set at around 2. On other cuts in hardwood, you might want to be up at 4 or even the automatic setting for a lot of wood cuts. So great feature. Another thing that's really a standout on this is the splinter guard. Now, when you first use the tool itself comes with 1 splinter guard. The accessory kit comes with 5 of them. But what you're going to want to do with the tool off is take the splinter guard and slide it into the base or the shoe here, about halfway, so it's just in front of the blade. And then you're going to power up the tool and push it into something that's not your body. Don't shove it into your leg or your hand. You want to take this, push it up against your workbench or a piece of wood or something like that. And you want to do that until it's flush with the front of the shoe. What that does is it'll actually cause the blade to cut through this clear insert and create a completely custom, perfectly fit, zero clearance insert for that specific blade. Now, if you swap out blades, especially if it's a different blade thickness, you might potentially have to do the same thing with another insert for that type of blade or for that specific blade. So if you're doing a lot of blade changes with different thicknesses, that could potentially become a bit of a headache. But we think on the whole, this is really a big plus because if you're cutting plywood or things that are prone to splintering, this reduces, if not completely eliminates it on many cuts, and it's really, really a great feature on the tool. While we're talking about the blade, let me pop off this base here for a second. A lot of times with other jigsaws, when it's time to remove the blade, you've got to touch it, and usually the blade's hot. So Festool has this nifty gizmo here. It's this little sliding mechanism. You want to aim the blade away from your kitten or your poodle or anything else cute that you don't want to maim with a searing hot jigsaw blade. And when I push it, you can see it ejects the blade out. And to put the blade back in, the blade base, or the receptacle that the blade goes into kind of angles. So you push the blade in and then you just turn it and it locks into place. Really, really simple. One thing to be aware of is that this tool has a blade guide that is adjustable. Now on some other jigsaws, you put the blade in, you don't really think about the blade guide. This particular blade guide is really designed to maximize performance. The downside to that is that you have to adjust it basically every time you're changing blade thicknesses. And so again, that caveat of if you're doing a lot of different types of blades, you're going to wind up having to do a lot of adjustments. And unfortunately, it's not something you can adjust with a simple on-tool dial or something like that. You need to use an Allen wrench that comes separately with the tool. I'm not a big fan of that separate Allen wrench adjustment on virtually any power tool. So in a future version, I'd love to see a simple, quick adjust or even an automatic adjustment for this blade guide. With that said, the blade guide is awesome. It's really close to the work surface, and it really does a fantastic job of minimizing blade deflection, which is a big problem on a lot of saws, even ones that have blade guides on them. So that's a cool thing. Let me fire this blade out of here again. One thing about that blade ejection mechanism, I haven't heard of any issues with it. I was a little surprised that it's basically a plastic, kind of piece of plastic that you wind up shoving forward to release the blade. I would have expected a little bit more heavy-duty construction on that from Festool, but again, I haven't heard of any issues with it, so it's probably a non-issue. This slide here, or this clear guard in the front, helps with dust collection. So you can have it either halfway down or all the way up. If you're doing something that you're using the dust collector on, which I'll go into in a second, you'll want it all the way down. Let's talk about some of these bases here. You saw me pop off the standard base. The way that's done is just with this little lever here. And you have both options in terms of the base as well as the shoe that goes on that base. Now this is the standard shoe that comes with it. The way you change these is there's a little depression here. You push in, slide it forward, the shoe comes right off. Let's talk about some of the shoes that come with the accessory kit. The first one here is a dimpled shoe. With any of these shoes, you basically kind of line up some notches on the back and slide it forward, and easy peasy, it's in place. This dimpled shoe is great for cutting something like OSB with a rough surface. There's very minimal surface contact, so you can kind of glide over rough surfaces really easily. Another accessory is the metal shoe. This one has metal in it, and so if you're cutting metal, you're not going to get burrs or little scrap pieces of metal shavings that are going to scratch up a typical plastic shoe or the regular shoe that comes with the saw. It also gives you a really nice smooth mating surface between the tool and the workpiece that you're cutting. There's also a phenolic surface. This is also really nice and smooth, primarily used for cutting wood products. And the stick fix shoe. Now this is designed for these little felt pads that come with the accessory kit. This kind of doubles as a dispenser. And essentially what you do is push this into the pad. There's a little hook and loop connection there. And then essentially what you have is a felt bottom to the shoe on your jigsaw. So if you're cutting really finely finished material, anything you don't want to scratch or mar, that's a great accessory to have handy for a cut so that you don't essentially ruin your workpiece. Now you can take off the entire base here, and we'll dive into one of the more exotic bases that come with the accessory kit, and that is this bevel base. Now there's some things to be aware of with this. One is that it opens up kind of an unprecedented level of bevels that you can do. And you can also do these with curving cuts, or if you have a straight piece of wood, in this particular setting, you can actually go on that edge and cut a perfect 45 right along that edge. A number of cuts you can do with this that would be very difficult, if not impossible, to do with other jigsaws. One thing to be aware of, though, is that it's not it's limited in one particular way in terms of bevel cuts. A lot of folks like to use jigsaws to back scribe and do a bevel cut on the back of a workpiece. So let's say, for example, I had a countertop here and I wanted to cut with a slight back bevel a scribe line on the back of that workpiece. So imagine that piece is in front of me here. I'd put the jigsaw down. I'm going to put a little bit more bevel so it's more obvious here. What this would mean with this particular tool and this particular shoe is that I would be putting the weight of the tool on the waste piece that I am cutting off on that scribe line. And on many back scribe situations, there's almost no waste piece to begin with. So what you'd wind up doing with this particular tool is essentially freehanding it, and you're just not going to get an accurate cut. It's not a recommended way to use the tool, obviously. So that is really a significant limitation. Now, there may be other shoes that come out that eliminate this in the future, but in the current configuration with the accessories we had available at the time of this review, we can't recommend this at all for any type of back scribing cut like the one I just described. So, so if you do a lot of that type of cutting, you're going to want a different saw. So let's talk about another accessory here, and that is this particular shoe. Now this is kind of a dual purpose base. This can be used with an edge guide. So if you have a Festool edge guide in place, this little lip just pops right into that and you can do a nice straight cut with it. The other thing that this works with is this circle cutter that comes with the accessory kit. Now this is really cool. It basically just clips right into place here, just like that. And I'm going to pop it off here for a second so you can see how this works. You basically dial this to left to loosen it, and that allows you to adjust to whatever radius you want for your circle. Now this will go, first off, don't panic, it's in metric, so this is all centimeters here. But this goes up to about 5 feet. So that means you could potentially cut a 10-foot diameter circle. It would take you a while, but with your jigsaw, with your Carvex. Once you get it set to whatever radius you want, you dial this the other way to lock it. Once you get it locked into place, it's very secure. This is not going to wiggle. There's no play in it. So you get a really, really precise circle with this. One thing to be aware of, the pin for this, it stows on board, which is really cool. If you're cutting counterclockwise, you would want your jigsaw on the bottom mount here, and you would also want the pin on the bottom hole. If you're cutting clockwise, your jigsaw would be on the top mount here, and you would want the pin on this top hole as well. So just something to be aware of if you're cutting circles with it. If you are doing any type of circle cutting with a jigsaw, this is a really, really cool accessory to have, and well worth it just for the accessory kit for this accessory alone. So that covers most of the accessories and basic functions of the tool. I want to talk a little bit about kind of who this is for and who it's not for, and we touched upon that a little bit with the back scribing issue. With that said, if you want a kind of general purpose jigsaw and you're just a typical carpenter and you want something that you can quickly just grab and make a few cuts with, and you're not super worried about precision, this honestly would not be a recommendation for you. It's a relatively expensive tool, and there's a lot of great jigsaws out there that are just kind of grab and go. You're not having to adjust the clamping mechanism on the blade guide. You're not having to mess around with an insert necessarily. There's downsides to that, obviously, but there's other jigsaws out there that are just easier to use and more efficient to use. With that said, if you're into highly precise work and you're doing a lot of custom cabinetry or custom installations, and precision is very important to you, not marring your work surfaces, wanting the flexibility to do really creative cuts, cutting circles, all those types of things, that's where the Carvex really, really excels, and it's a great saw for that type of work. So for more details about this particular tool, as well as other wonderful tools and products in the world of power tools, hand tools, home improvement in general, drop by homefixated.com, and we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks so much.